Okay, we're going to get started today. First of all, thank you everybody for attending today's presentation on driving wellness and Parkinson's disease. Today's presenter is Jaclyn Davin, OTR, CDRS, CDI. She's with the Driving Assessment Program at Spaulding Rehabilitation Hospital, Cape Cod, Mass General Brigham. Her background is that she's an occupational therapist with her education from Quinnipiac University, Bachelor's of Science in Occupational Therapy. She's got special training and certification. She's a certified driving instructor, ADED, certified driving rehabilitation specialist. Her clinical interests are driving and community mobility, neuro rehab, cognitive rehab, general orthopedics of the shoulder, elbow, and wrist. And so we're very happy that she's able to join us for this very important presentation today. We also want to thank our partners down on Cape Cod, Spaulding Rehabilitation Hospital on Cape Cod. We've got here in Massachusetts, we've got a large Parkinson's population on Cape Cod, and they do a fantastic job on Cape Cod servicing the individuals with Parkinson's disease. And so want to thank everybody for coming today, and thank you. So my name is Bill Patchane. I'm the Executive Director for the APDA here in Massachusetts, and welcome to today's presentation. The APDA of Massachusetts has been in operation for decades and offers programs and services to the PD community in Mass and surrounding states. We've received a large response for today's presentation. And so we have participants from all over the country. And this presentation is going to be specific to driving, but general enough so that it will be applicable to all those joining us from outside the state of Massachusetts. There's been a tremendous amount of progress in understanding and treating Parkinson's disease. As you may know, Parkinson's disease is highly individualized from person to person. Not all that is discussed today is relevant to everyone. The healthcare team must be familiar with signs and symptoms, treatment strategies, and how PD impacts an individual patient. Treating PD requires a team approach, and today Jackie is going to speak, from her perspective on being, part of a great comprehensive team. And so today we are providing information that is not considered to be medical information or medical advice. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jackie Davin, and thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jackie. I am an occupational therapist, as Bill has so wonderfully introduced me. I am going to make sure that we talk a little bit about this topic of driving and continued driving in a general enough way that applies to everybody listening. Of course, if there are specific restrictions, we want to make sure that we check with our state outside of Massachusetts. So I want to say thank you, and this is a wonderful platform and opportunity to reach so many. I'm going to give some statistics first and share with you kind of where our country is going in terms of older drivers in general. The statistics are based on the CDC's 2018 research, which was done as a look back in 2020. It's usually done every 2 years, so we'll be due in 2022. But as of 2018, there's about 45 million licensed drivers age 65 and older in the US. That's a 60% increase. And we probably know why, and that's because the baby boomers are aging. About 7,700 older adults were killed in traffic crashes. More than 250 were treated in emergency departments. And that means each day more than 20 older adults are killed and almost 700 are injured. And that number is actually lower than it would be for those that are age 16 to 21. That's your highest crash risk, the fatality rate. The reason there's so many more injuries that are being treated in the ER and in the hospital is because those that are age 75 and older have a higher crash death rate and injury rate. And that usually is purely because after the age of 75, we're all frailer. And so we don't quite bounce back from fender benders and minor bumps and bruises like we would have before. And we also may carry other comorbidities, which makes the risk in a crash much higher. So why am I saying all of that? It's certainly not to scare you, but it's to give you a perspective that as a country, we're getting older, which means that of that 60% of older adults is also a higher incidence of all different kinds of medical conditions. Overall, across all age groups, men tend to be driving longer and may have a higher death rate, a decline in vision and cognitive functioning, such as ability to reason or remember, as well as physical changes are sometimes what are impacting older adults' driving ability. It is not age. The population is expected to continue to age. 84% of Americans 65 and older do continue to drive. And what's interesting is that as we get older and as the population gets older, they're driving more miles than even what we drive today. And so that means that there needs to be value in being able to stay healthy behind the wheel. And there's been lots of research in terms of driving and community mobility. Community mobility is defined as our ability to move around the community, whether it is by bicycle or being a pedestrian, whether it's using the subway or public transit, whether it's using Uber or a bus system, an airplane, okay, that's community mobility. And then driving is a piece of community mobility. But it's a part of our well-being. It's often central to our autonomy and independence. Limited access to the community because driving is no longer a safe option has been shown to lead to depression, isolation, decreased participation in meaningful activities, decreased ability for one to care for themselves, and diminished wellness overall, which means that we really do want to stay as healthy as possible to keep driving as long as possible. So that means that we want to work on our longevity. And driving wellness is not just a Parkinson's disease issue. It's a wellness issue. And so the difference when it comes to Parkinson's or the medical condition is that the medical condition is going to dictate when we retire or stop driving rather than the question of if we retire. So that's a kind of a big question or statement. And so I think that's the piece that many people forget is that it is not an age-related issue, it is a medical issue. And that's why the when is so specific. So I wanted just to reinforce two resources from a wellness perspective that are ways to plan for a transportation retirement plan. So we plan for all kinds of things when it comes to retirement. We plan for where we might want to live. We plan for our finances. We plan for even some of our care needs. But we don't always plan for how we'll continue to get around or how each other may continue to get around if one of the team or spouse is not available. And so there's two resources that I highlighted. One is offered through NHTSA. It's this website. It's called Driving Safely While Aging. Okay, and the websites are on the slides so you guys could pull them through. There should be a PDF of the presentation. This website allows for self-assessment, things to watch for in terms of changes, resources, as well as alternative transportation planning. It may not be specific to your area or region, but it is at least a good place to start in terms of investigation. And the other one is called planfortheroadahead.com. This snippet of their website, this is where that address will take you. Underneath aging and driving, it gives you a bunch of links and information for you to plan. The Take Control tab gives you a series of self-assessments. The Moving On and Getting Out gives you an idea of all the other resources available to continue to stay mobile. And then there's even additional resources and links embedded within the website. So both these websites are great places to at least start the process of planning for a transportation transition plan, which I feel all of us should start doing and have a backup for just in case anything comes up in terms of either partner's health. So let's talk about driving and community mobility in general. Driving is one of the most complex activities that we do. It's the simultaneous coordination of physical, cognitive, and visual skills at the speed to process and execute in response to the moving environment. And all of us know it's hard to predict what everybody around us is going to do. Driving utilizes physical skills such as range of motion, coordination, and strength. It utilizes visual skills for searching and scanning, acuity, depth, and contrast. And I'm going to define visual searching versus visual scanning, because our visual searching ability is cognitively based. It lives in our executive functions, which is our frontal lobe. That's our planning and reasoning and problem solving. It's also what takes over in terms of a motor cortex with Parkinson's. And so our visual search skills are targeted and thought out. Like we know a stop sign's off to our right, so our eyes automatically go there because we have previous knowledge that's what's supposed to be there or where we're supposed to look. Scanning, on the other hand, is our ability to move our eyes in a pattern to take in the moving information in the environment. And so both of those things can be impacted with Parkinson's. So it's important to differentiate the two. On a third note, driving utilizes the cognitive skills of predicting, remembering, decision-making, judging, planning, sequencing, shifting attention, and multitasking. So if we have all of those things trying to come to play, there's certain particular pieces of our health that are going to impact our performance in the car more than others. And I'm going to look at this from a wellness perspective. One of them is medication. So for all older adults and all people who take medication, there's always potential side effects, but there's also a category list of medications that may contribute more to falls or more contribute more to crashes based on research. And I listed those in the top left corner of your screen. Those are your opiate and narcotic meds, your antidepressant meds, anti-anxiety, your prescription over-the-counter sleep aids, your high blood pressure meds, our muscle relaxing medications, your antipsychosis and mood stabilizing meds. Parkinson's medications have a gamut of benefits and side effects depending on the individual. And knowing your on time or best window and having backup medication on you to reduce delays and staying on top of the medication schedule while you're out can improve safety. So if you know you're going to be out for a longer period of time, to make sure you've planned ahead to have what you need with you so that you don't have a longer than necessary window, which then puts your physical functioning, let's say, for example, at risk. Always check with your doctor regarding driving and your personal medications. There is a website I included. It is the CDC's website. It's just a template for you to be able to write out and list your own medications and print it out and then kind of carry it with you. So you always have your medications on you. If not, I've seen lots of different medication lists, but it's important to make sure they're always on you. For medical needs, for emergency cases, to have someone, for an individual to have access, or an emergency personnel to have access. And then side effects are something to consider. And side effects can range widely with medication. And we know that in terms of managing Parkinson's disease, that there is sometimes a fine balance in finding what works for each individual. And so sometimes people are experiencing those side effects for a period of time, and then that medication's taken away and they try something else, or they tweak the dose, and it no longer is an issue. But just be aware of the list that I provided on the right and what can impact, what may exacerbate what you're already experiencing. And if you ever have questions about kind of what that medication side effects might be, because it's new to you and you don't know maybe what to watch for, besides the list it comes with from the pharmacy, the Roadwise RX, which is the website on the bottom right, is an open website. I think I have a snippet. Looks like this. It allows you to type in the medication at the top and hit search, and it gives you a list of like what the side effects would be, what it's used for typically, and some information in regards specifically to driving. So that way you at least can have a more targeted conversation with your doctor if there's areas of concern with taking a certain medication. Your vision health is the next thing that we're going to talk about. So in general, vision health needs to be maintained. This is from a wellness perspective as well as a Parkinson's perspective. 90% of what we do while we're driving is taking in visual information and interpreting it. Parkinson's disease does not necessarily dictate any specific changes to eye health, but general aging might. We know that as we all age, each individual is not 100% black and white, and so we have lots of gray things that each of us has to deal with. So making sure we have routine eye care, monitoring for things like cataracts and macular degeneration, glaucoma, diabetic retinopathy, which all may be associated with any what's called comorbidities or other diagnoses somebody has. Each state has specific visual medical standards with their Registry of Motor Vehicles or Department of Motor Vehicles. And so you want to make sure that you are maintaining those and kind of have a sense of what they are. They usually are available on your Registry of Motor Vehicles or Department of Motor Vehicles website. When you look at medical standards, there should be one for vision. Specific to Parkinson's would be areas to focus on, and we're going to talk about these further, but I'm going to highlight just briefly things like a change in blink rate, your scanning speed, and ocular motor control, or how well your eyes are able to move where you want them to and as quickly as you want them to, can be impacted, just like the rest of the muscles can be impacted in terms of moving and recruiting them when you want them. So we want to maintain our vision health. Our physical health. Physical impairments associated with Parkinson's may impact reaction time and the effectiveness of motor responses. And so we see that sometimes with typical Parkinson's, episodes of freezing or tremors or hand tremors. You might see tightening of the muscles or rigidity. You might see slower motor planning in terms of being able to coordinate the hands or even the pace of walking. There might be an associated decreased leg strength. That's not always the case though. Usually leg strength and muscle strength is preserved. It's just using it the way we want to and recruiting it for when we want to. That does not seem to happen. Balance changes and falling. And of course, there's always those secondary medical concerns that people may have to deal with that have more to do with depression and blood pressure control and sleep pattern changes and bowel and bladder changes that may affect some individuals, but not all. We want to be able to maintain our physical health and our cognitive health. Cognitive skills are defined as our ability to think through and reason in our brain. And cognitive changes, specifically executive functioning changes, which again is the frontal lobe, is the most common area impacted. It's the area that's responsible for multitasking and processing speed. And it's kind of an anticipated area to change. It's also where our problem solving lives and our ability to generate alternative solutions, as you can see by a rather cute picture of my youngest daughter, which I couldn't resist taking. But more than that, when you see more cognitive changes than that in terms of attention or memory, those are not your typical changes for your typical Parkinson's. They're more your atypical. And they also can impact your driving safety earlier. And so we kind of need to have a good sense of how somebody's cognitive health is and monitor it as we are monitoring everything else. The reason the executive functions are an area that we know will change is because so much of our motor cortex takes over for our timing and thinking about our movement. And so all of a sudden that frontal lobe is multitasking. And it's multitasking how you're moving, how fast you're moving, when you're moving, where you're going, what you're doing while you're there, what you may have encountered along the way. And all of a sudden it's multitasking to a level that can also be overwhelming. And so that's where the executive functions are noted to change the most. It's just the demand is so much higher in that part of the brain. I'd like to review some overall ideas for being safe in the car. And again, these are overall wellness focused, okay? They apply to both well elderly and those with Parkinson's. And that's number one, to reduce your risk. Know when you're tired and drive when you're well rested. Driving tired increases risk for crash. That's for anybody. Manage your medications and be aware of how they make you feel, and plan your driving times around your optimal window. And all of us may have an optimal window. Some people do better in the morning, some people do better in the afternoon. Even planning your appointments as such, so that when you're going out to take care of a medical appointment, you're hopefully at a better window to manage the demands of the appointment and the travel. Arrange for travel companions to assist with knowing when to take over the driving if you're tired. Be brave and ask others, how is my driving? And that's a hard one, but having open conversations about your own driving and having feedback about how you're driving can keep the conversation fluid and open. And so when others may no longer want to drive with you or are nervous to ride with somebody, it allows you to then be brave and be involved in the decision and ask more pointed questions about what's making someone uncomfortable, and be part of knowing when maybe it is time to stop. Follow safe driving procedures. Those are your old school, traditional, scanning 2 to 3 blocks ahead, keeping a good follow distance with the 2-second rule, review mirror checks every 3 to 5 seconds, making sure we're looking behind us when we're backing up, all those things we learned originally in driver's ed. And I will say that driving is one of the few things that we can have a license for or a certificate for, but are never required to do any type of follow-up education in our lifetime. And even as the rules change within our state, and as the handbook is updated, it's not necessarily like there's education clearly provided to keep everybody even up to date on those changes. So don't be afraid ever to take a health refresher course that can be offered through AAA or AARP. Sometimes just having that stuff reiterated and reviewed with you reminds you of some of the things that you could be doing to be safer. The last piece I want to talk about on terms of safety in the car is technology. Technology nowadays is significantly more advanced and continuously changing. It differs between car type. It differs between years of which the car was made, even if it's the same exact car and you're sticking with a Honda CR-V and you've had one for the last 20 years, even within the same car, it is changing. And it's also not always called the same thing. So our backup camera, for the most part, is standard at this point. Lane departure and blind spot warnings all warn you differently. There is some cars that remind you to brake. There's some that auto brake. And so my advice is to make sure that you understand what your car features are, that you've read the handbook, that you have a sense of what it is to activate, turn on or off the extra buzzing, bumping, vibrating, dinging, whether you want it on or not. And if you're ever unclear, there's a website that's called My Car Does What, and you type in what the feature is your car has, and it will give you an example and a video of how it should work in terms of being an alert or warning system. And that's my next piece of information, is that all the technology out there is only that. It's an alert or warning system. It is not replacing the decision-making. It is not replacing the technical abilities of the driver themselves, okay? There could be a whole presentation just on technology. There's so much out there. A little further in terms of safety in the car, some states have a very active program called CarFit. CarFit is a program that was developed with AARP, AAA, and AOTA, which is the American Occupational Therapy Association. And they can give you it's usually a community-based program. It is offered where people can sign up and they drive through with their car and they get like a 12-point, 14-point inspection and get a sense of how they fit in their car to optimize their safety in case there was an accident or crash. So this is hopefully taking that person who's 75 and older who might be at higher risk for injury and changing the boundaries of an injury versus a fatality. And so making sure we have clear line over the steering wheel of at least 3 inches so that visually your eyes are 3 inches from the top of the steering wheel. That may mean raising your seat, that may mean lowering your wheel. Plenty of room between your chest bone and the airbag. You want about 10 inches, which is, or take a sheet of paper and turn it sideways. Some people can't get that close because they're short. I mean, get that far because they're short. And so they pull themselves in to be able to reach the pedals. But just be aware that an airbag expands and deploys very quickly at a very, very high rate. It's less than a blink of an eye, and it only stays inflated for about 3/4 of a second. And so it's a high impact opportunity, and there's more collarbone fractures, wrist, hand injuries, facial injuries, even concussion injuries because of the airbag itself and being in such close proximity. So giving yourself that 10 inches is excellent. Make sure the seat fits you comfortably and safely. Don't be afraid to readjust it between the 2 people that are driving or 3 people that are driving. It's so easy to get in the car when your spouse is driven or partner is driven and not adjust anything, but please do personally adjust. Make sure your head restraint is properly adjusted. That's particularly for preventing whiplash and for rear end collisions. And it gives some feedback here and direction on making sure that the center of the head restraint is about 3 inches or less from the center of the back of your head, not necessarily against your neck. And you don't want the headrest to be too low so your head bounces over it either. And you don't want it to be too high. Then you've got the big gap and you're going to get more whiplash. Make sure you have easy access to the gas and brake. Some people have to stretch. Some people have to move their chair in. Some people have to sit with the cushion behind their back. Some people have adjustable gas and brake pedals that they can actually bring them further closer to them. Some cars have that. You want to make sure that you've got comfort in completely depressing the brake pedal, not just using your toes. Seat belt, make sure it's in a proper position so it remains comfortable as you drive. We don't want it up here. We don't want it tucked under your arm. It's not going to do what it needs to. We want to make sure that it's on your pelvis, across your hips. The strap that goes low, we don't want it necessarily across the middle of your belly. If you've got more girth in your tummy, you want to make sure you tuck it underneath so you don't cause internal injuries to your stomach. And there's lots of neat technology that can make the strapping more comfortable. Always remember to adjust where it is on the frame, if it's adjustable, between drivers. We want to adjust your mirrors so that you have clean view all the way around your car and remove any blind spots. Not everybody is a driver, and some people are already a passenger or you take out passengers. Some people have elderly parents that they take out. And so I did list some passenger safety information. There are transfer options available. I put a picture of what's called the handy bar down here in the corner. The handy bar is a glass cutter, seatbelt cutter. It's your emergency bar, but it happens to also fit in what's called your B frame, not the angle where your windshield is, but the side where your door is. There's a little D hook for where the door latches to. The glass cutter part rests right inside of that, and you've given yourself a handle to push off of to get out of the car. It's one of those things that has multi-purpose, but can certainly make someone getting up out of a low seat easier. Consider seat cushions so that the seatbelt is more comfortable for somebody and it's easier to transfer in and out. Not to tuck the seatbelt, like we said. You could pad the seatbelt strap. There are things out there to help grabbing it or reaching for it. There's built-up key grips, so it's easier to hold onto a key, the house key, and turn a key. There's wider rear view mirrors. And of course, like we said before, the more bells and whistles a car has doesn't mean it's safer. And we talked about the technology. And sometimes that stuff can be stressful, cause anxiety to the driver because there's things going on that are a little bit unknown. And so knowing when you want to use them or how to shut them off is also important. So let's talk about some health changes specific to Parkinson's. Our alertness level or drowsiness due to the disease itself or medication can be a concern. Our medication timing, our emotional levels and anxiety levels, because the more overwhelmed we are, the more we ask ourselves to do, the harder it is, and it might be hard to make good decisions if driving creates anxiety. Our cognitive changes, specifically awareness of what's happening and how we're changing, which is our ability to think about ourselves. Decision making, attention, which is being able to pay attention to more than one thing at a time or select something important out of a busy environment, which is called selective attention, and ignoring the things that are unimportant. Processing speed, how fast the computer is working more or less, and executive function, which is that multitasking and planning and problem solving can be a concern. The decreased visual scanning, and that has to do with changes to the eye muscles and the speed of the eye muscle movement. Visual motor integration, which is your ability to time a reaction to what you see. So I always call that a relay race. You have to be able to see the person's brake lights in front of you, to go, okay, they're braking, which means I should brake. So you've seen it, you've thought it, and now you need to tell your feet to move, to actually hit the brake to stop. And so brake reaction time is that relay race. It's how fast we can see something and process what we saw, interpret it into something meaningful, make a decision about it, and then produce the motor reaction to respond to it. And then decreased blink rate might be a concern. And you might wonder why that's an issue, but if we're not blinking enough, our eyes can become dry, they can become watery, they may not move as much, and that may make somebody constantly wipe their eye. And I have seen people that have come to me in my specialty practice, and they've been pulled over or had a small fender bender because at the same time they were backing out of a parking space, they were wiping their eye and they didn't catch how far they went, and they had a traffic infraction and had to come in for an evaluation. And I've had more than one person say, I'm just wiping my eyes. So blink rate in general, or dry eyes or runny eyes, can be an issue. So let's think about how each of those things will play out, what they look like in the car. And I'm bringing this up so that people are aware, if I'm driving with my spouse who has Parkinson's, what should I watch for? What should I be looking for? The motor performance area, we're going to worry about delayed reactions, which basically means a delayed brake reaction. So if you think and see the brake lights in front of you and it feels like a little bit before your partner hits the brakes, it's something to watch. Slower steering, so ability to get hand over hand for a turn may happen, or slower scanning, like catching all the information and judging a gap and deciding to go. Greater difficulty seeing at night or in bad weather, and that may be because of contrast, which is impacted by cataracts. It could also be glare. Sometimes people have cataract surgery and glare becomes more of an issue after the surgery. Some people don't feel as comfortable or as confident driving in those conditions because they feel like they can't see as well, and so they choose not to. They self-restrict. Spatial skills, such as maintaining your lane. Maintaining a lane should not necessarily be work. It should be something that we're able to look high and out and maintain the spacing of the vehicle in the lane. If we start looking closer to the vehicle, the front of the vehicle or the lane itself, or watching more just the car in front of us and not looking as far out, that can actually impact the lane position. The blink rate and the fixed gaze means that I might be looking forward a lot longer than I should, and I'm not moving my eyes to catch information or checking my rear view as often as I should, which means that I'm not going to catch things I should be responding to. And decreased scanning, particularly noted at merges and backing up. Those are the two big areas that we see an impact. I listed some warning signs. These are produced in 2018 by the Association for Driving Rehab Specialists. They're specific to Parkinson's. These warning signs are things that should be conversation starters. They may be a reason to have conversation with the doctor, as well as conversation between each other. Some of these include increased falls, forward head posture or decreased mobility in the trunk and in the head itself, an increase in episodes of getting stuck while walking, fluctuations in levels of arousal, slower motor performance, maybe hitting both pedals with one foot by accident happening once or twice, which we never want to happen at all, but maybe it has. Inappropriate or inconsistent driving speeds. I see in my in-vehicle assessments that people tend to drive as fast as those around them, and there's less awareness for speed limit signs. Or it's the exact opposite. There's such awareness for the speed limit sign that every time we pass a sign, we brake heavily to bring ourselves down to the speed. But sometimes there's just a lack of awareness. And so somebody might be driving 10 miles lower, and then a little bit later, they're 10 miles higher, and then it's a big fluctuation. And so we want to make sure we're actually doing this posted speed. It's an absolute. So we want to stay as close as we can. Any accidents or near misses? Pattern of getting lost, even in familiar areas, or not feeling as confident about a route. You might see that if you're the passenger and how they may get to a familiar location isn't the way they usually do. Or if somebody is out to run an errand and gone for a particularly long time, it might be reason to ask or raise question. Decreased clearing of the feet from the floor is going to also indicate a change in motor function and brake reaction. I'm going to say most people have a smartphone. I do have a lot of clients and their partners will put a tracking app on their cell phone so that if they were to open their maps, like Google Maps, you can actually see where your loved one is, just like you would track a teenager when they're starting to drive, just so that you have a sense that they're still at the store, or they're on their way home, or they're nowhere near the route they said. And that sometimes gives people a sense of comfort in knowing where each other is, especially if something should happen and they ran into car trouble. It's even easier to find the person to get help out there faster. In terms of falls, we've got trends, and falling is one of them. AAA did an older driver study and found that a history of falling, this is not falling just once, this is a history of like multiple falls. There's a 40% higher risk and likelihood of having a crash than their peers. Okay. They put together this flyer, and this flyer indicated that if we prevent falls, as research can show us, we might also avoid crashes. And so if we have that higher crash risk or higher fall risk, it usually is an indicator that there's other frailties. That's basically what the research found, which from a medical standpoint is fairly logical, okay? If you're falling, there's risk or concern about lower body weakness, maybe balance issues, there might be reaction time issues, there might be balance concerns, there might be medication concerns that are contributing to falls, right? We might be worried about overall fitness in terms of strength and balance. We're going to try to make sure we increase someone's physical functioning, cognitive functioning, and have a good constant medical workup to know that we're reducing falls as much as we can, and therefore then avoiding crashes. There is a higher incidence of change in alertness levels in falls and near falls with Parkinson's. Driving errors have been noted to increase after about 2 years with the diagnosis. There starts to be little errors that are happening in our driving behaviors. Those errors can be small things. A driving error is what's categorized as like failing to look and do a head check for a lane change, or not looking behind you and backing up, or not checking the rear view mirror before braking to adjust for speed. Little things that would have been more habit to happen before get kind of dropped off. And those little errors can lead to eventual crash risk. Early Parkinson's can demonstrate driving errors, but there's no evidence that shows an increased risk of crash at the early stages, which is good news. That means that just because you have the diagnosis does not mean you should stop driving. It's very individualized and specific to each person. And that driving longevity, like we talked about in the beginning, is entirely dictated in how your signs and symptoms play out and progress over time. So what are your options? We talked about safety that affects everybody and staying on top of your vision health, your cognitive health, your medications. There's little things you can do within the car. Some people naturally adjust by increasing their following distance. This gives them more time to respond. They might increase their stopping distance and give a little bit more cushion between themselves and the cars in front of them than they used to. Some people start to be a little bit more vigilant about driving the speed limit and staying on top of that. Some people are better at planning to drive at their best medication window in the day. Staying open to ongoing conversation about your driving ability, just like everything else. And a good plan is to always have a designated retirement plan for driving itself and mobility. So looking at how are you and your partner or you and your family member going to continue to get around should one of you be sick, should one of you be hospitalized. Sorry. And the last piece is to exercise. We want to make sure that we keep everybody mobile. We know exercise is one of the best medication or best prescriptions for Parkinson's. And so to preserve the overall health on multiple levels, we know that exercise is one of those things. But there's also a local driving rehab program. And sometimes these conversations can be difficult. Sometimes there are challenges in being able to feel like you're judging correctly. And so you may want to involve a third party beyond the physician. And so a certified driving rehab specialist or a driving rehab specialist in a driving rehabilitation program can evaluate your current physical, visual, and cognitive skills, as well as take into account the medications and your overall fitness as it specifically relates to Parkinson's disease and driving. They do a in-clinic assessment first to get a sense of where you are and how you meet the standards and how you're doing overall. And then they may choose to conduct an on-road assessment to evaluate your driving ability even further. And then they can help be part of planning either lessons to help keep your skills sharp. They can do yearly follow-ups to monitor over time. They can be part of the planning for retirement and mobility. They're an asset in terms of the team. And we started by talking about having a strong team. And I always joke and say that, you know, at some point we end up with an executive board of people who make decisions about us that we didn't necessarily appoint, but they kind of come into our lives as each medical condition gets added to our list. And so your neurologist and your primary care and your ophthalmologist and maybe you have a cardiologist and you suddenly have all these professionals who have an opinion about you and all these appointments. This is one of those people you can put on your executive board and choose to put them there. And they can be involved in triaging and working with the team to stay on top of your overall wellness and be part of the conversation should you be concerned about if it's time to stop. There's 2 resources listed here. One is the ADED resource, which is the Association for Driving Rehab Specialists, should you want to find a specialist in your area or state. And the other is the American Occupational Therapy Association's website that also has a directory search to also look for a specialist specifically in your state. I have some resources and references attached to the end if anybody wants to look further. I'm going to give us an opportunity for questions and pass it back to Bill.
Sure, thank you very much. It was a wonderful presentation and very important information. We've got quite a few questions for you today, and so hopefully we'll be able to get through all or at least the majority of those. One of the questions that we have is there a fee for OATA?
Is there a fee?
To access that information?
No. So if you go to the American Occupational Therapy Association or the Association for Driving Rehab Specialists to search for a professional, there is no fee to search. Is that what, hopefully that answers?
Yes. Yeah.
All of the
Have you-
websites I listed, all the websites I listed today are free. There's no charge, sign up, nothing like that.
Good. Another question is, have you seen or heard of many cases of drivers' feet freezing while driving and suggestions for preventing or helping the situation?
So what I've seen when we have those higher freezing episodes, I see people have a difficulty getting off the gas to the brake fast enough. I also see difficulty with the person being able to regulate the gas pedal. There's either too much pressure or too little pressure. And so you feel that in the car. So I have seen it impact driving performance in an unsafe way. Freezing episodes, especially if they're happening within gait, is usually a strong indicator that we may be getting close to that benchmark of really needing to look at driving more seriously. Sometimes it's time for a medication adjustment. Sometimes it's time to have a visit or follow up with the neurologist. Maybe it's been a while, we've been on the same meds for a while, to see if there's options for breakthrough movement in terms of those freezing episodes. Sometimes that might be the best the person can be at that point. And so then we do have, it eliminates the medical options. We may have to really look at driving safety and even retirement.
Another question that we have is, if the PD patient insists on driving, which seat is the safest for the passenger to sit?
I think the research is behind the driver in the back seat.
Good. Another question is, my husband had an OT driving evaluation. Can he have a second one with you? He thinks the first one was not correct. And if so, how can they contact you?
So if you're within Massachusetts and you're looking for a second opinion, there is, Spaulding has multiple sites. I know the RMV has multiple sites. Our program can be accessed by getting in touch with our scheduling department and having a prescription sent over. We do ask for a doctor's prescription just to make sure that there is somebody kind of overseeing your care who's going to be involved with the decision making, and that can be sent to our scheduling department at the Spaulding Cape Cod Hospital scheduling department. That can be found online. Our website is pretty thorough, as well as our driving program does have a website. It lives within the Spaulding gamut of resources, and there is a web page that has like how to reach out to scheduling, how to contact somebody, there's phone numbers. I did not put that link specifically into the presentation, but I know if you put Spaulding Rehab Driving Program, it usually from Google alone will get you there.
Yes, another question is there an accommodation or something that can modify the seatbelt for a driver? The person had DBS and the IPG battery is implanted on the right chest.
Okay, so they're the passenger, I'm assuming, if it's on their right chest.
Yeah.
So if we want to be able to accommodate where that location is, the first thought is to make sure that we are we're padding, and that can be padded with the seatbelt. It's the seatbelt itself, whether it's like a Velcro lamb's wool or additional padding, making sure it's as low as it can be, so it's sitting as low as possible. We don't want to tuck it under the arm, and I know that some people are doing that. But I guess my thought is, I know that the device is implanted here. If we had an accident and the worst that happened was having to go back in to have that corrected and everything else was okay, I think I'd cut my losses. So I would pad it for comfort, but make sure everything else is optimal as a passenger for safety, because that could be the least of the problems. So I would pad, and there are things available through Amazon and through an online search for seatbelt padding. So you have to look up, and there's all kinds of Velcro type things that you can be slid on.
Good. Another question is, how can I get my license reinstated in Massachusetts?
That is a tough one, and that is not an easy course. And so I am in no way associated with the registry. Our department and our program is not. Their process is very specific. as will every state. It all depends on how it was classified. If it was a voluntary surrender, if it was a suspension, if it was a revocation, there's so many terms that each have their own course of action. The first step is usually having the medical evaluation form completed by your physician. And most of the time you have to go through an appeal with a hearing officer. And only certain RMV websites or certain locations have hearing officers. That is a first come, first serve process. I don't believe there's appointments. Unless COVID changed that, there never has been before. So I would start by contacting medical affairs at the Registry of Motor Vehicles, and that phone number can be found online, or even in a letter that originally came to you indicating the status of your license, and ask them how to proceed, because it will clearly depend on exactly how it was classified.
Sure. Another question is a little bit more challenging. What does one do when a person with PD won't stop driving after he's been told to stop driving?
So I'm not going to ignore the fact that as a medical professional, we have a duty to report when we feel the person is unsafe. It's not my first course of action, nor is it really for any medical professional. Because as the last question shows us, if it's taken away too soon or taken away for even the application of a handicap placard, it's super hard to get it back. So it tends to be the last resort. But if there's clear documentation and conversation that has already told this individual to stop driving, it may be time to take action on the license itself. And that I leave to that individual's providers and a conversation with the providers. I know people have tried to, as families, reduce risk by giving scheduled transportation throughout the week, so there's less reason to drive if somebody's showing up to take them somewhere. I believe the transition to a passenger takes time, and so offering to drive, offering to patch in transportation, having a good plan for what your resources are in the area. There are some village to village type communities, which are, it started on Beacon Hill, there's a few of them on the Cape. Falmouth has one, it's Neighborhood Falmouth. There's one in Orleans and Dennis. And it's basically a volunteer association that you pay for access to, and they can help with anything from simple handyman stuff to transportation. So kind of looking at all your options for this person and making sure they have alternative means to get around and still feel engaged in the community and with their friends. Maybe some of their friends are willing to pick them up for that coffee shop Tuesday morning guys event or girls event instead of the person driving. There might be ways to slowly transition without it having to be as harsh, but at the same time, if it truly is a safety issue, we want to do the right thing as well.
Good. One more question, and then we'll close it out.
Okay.
What is a seat belt grip?
Okay, a seat belt grip is, there's two styles on Amazon. One has it's a flat piece of plastic that buckles together over the seat belt and has a loop, so it has a handle, so that if the person has trouble reaching across to get the seat belt as the driver or a passenger, it can be clamped onto the seat belt. It's like a firmer bottom and a little bit of a rubbery loop, so the person can reach over and grab it. The other one I've seen is like a nylon strapping with a handle. It can be black or red, depending on someone's visual status. And it can be attached to the seatbelt so the person can reach over and pull it across their body to access it.
Good. I want to thank Jackie for a wonderful presentation today and fantastic information and great job. It's obvious to all of us that you're certainly a specialist as it relates to this topic, and we very much appreciate your support and to not only the PD community, but your commitment to APDA. And so thank you very much, Jackie, for today's presentation.
Thank you so much.
And so today, Jackie, if you could go back one slide, please, if you don't mind. So today's presentation is recorded. We're going to have that, the presentation on our YouTube page. So if you know anybody that you think might, get benefit from today's presentation, It will be available shortly on our YouTube page. We'll also be distributing it in our newsletter. For those of you in Massachusetts, we have an information referral center here at BU Medical, campus, and the number is 617-638-8466. There you can get referrals and resources. If you have any additional questions on this topic, please reach out to us and we should be able to get you the answers to your questions. We provide education and support groups, symposiums, educational events. We also do health and wellness across the entire state and across the entire nation. We do exercise, fitness, professional training program, and here in Boston at Sargent College BU, we have the APDA National Rehabilitation Resource Center if you have any questions around rehab or exercise. Thank you. Next slide, please. And so follow us on all social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and we also have a website here in Massachusetts. Those of you from across the country, you should have similar structure, at your closest chapter. Reach out and they should be able to help you with resources. Here on Cape Cod, if we're planning a Cape Cod walk, Falmouth, September 19th, Sunday. If you're interested, please reach out or see our website here at apdama.org. If you know anybody that's local, certainly, make sure that they're participating. It's going to be a great community event, and hopefully we'll have the team from Spaulding participating. Good, last slide. We want to thank everybody for attending today's presentation. If you have any questions, again, the phone number is 800-651-8466. Visit apdama.org or email us at apdama@apdaparkinson.org. We want to thank Jackie and the group at Spaulding Rehabilitation Hospital on Cape Cod for all the support and wonderful presentation today. And we hope that everybody drives safely and has a great day. Thank you again for attending today's presentation.